What's going on, guys? This is Joe Gatone. You're listening or watching my channel, Broker Approved, Gatone Real Estate on YouTube. And today I wanted to talk about how you can probably buy a house and didn't even know it. And the reason I say it that way is because there's a lot of misconceptions out there, a lot of myths out there. We're going to smash them and we're going to tell you the truth. And I hope that this encourages some of you who may be paralyzed or handcuffed into thinking that you can't buy when really you probably can. So couple myths we're going to smash, and then a couple things about monthly payments we're going to get into. And I think you're going to, hopefully it'll enlighten you a little bit and explain how much more affordable this can actually be. And hopefully you can stop paying rent and paying someone else's mortgage and start gaining some equity. So the first thing I want to talk about is kind of a disclosure here, but really just to make sure everyone understands the first step, and that is to work with a mortgage lender. I definitely have a couple that I would prefer and I would refer you to, and I know they're good. I know they know how to structure things. Their fees are reasonable and all that stuff. The pre-approval process is pretty simple. It doesn't take very long. It's not an approval process. Approval is much more verified, proof of income and tax records and all these things that you're going to have to provide at some point. Pre-approval is a little bit less formal, where they may do a soft pull on your credit just to see what your credit score is, make sure there's nothing crazy on there like a foreclosure or a short sale, which would or potentially limit you. And then they can give you a realistic interest rate quote. And then they're also just going to ask you about your income. They may ask you to verify a couple things for income, but basically they're going to take your word for it, and then they're going to give you a pre-approval based on that stuff. That pre-approval is going to do one of two things. You're either going to be in one camp or the other. You're either going to be in a camp where the pre-approval kind of opens the door, where it's like, oh, I didn't know I could afford that much. That's great. Or it's going to be the other camp where that pre-approval is going to be the thing that limits you because you were thinking you could afford $2,000 a month, and the pre-approval came in and the lender's telling you can really only go up to $1,800 a month. Right, so now we gotta dial it back on what we're searching for and figure out how to get you something affordable in that range. Obviously, you want to be living well within your means. We can definitely show that as well when we're putting in offers, so that helps sellers feel more confident about your situation. You don't want to be pushing the limit. If you're approved up to $250K and you come in offering $250K, I mean, they could be a little bit apprehensive, like, well, how close is this person? Like, is this their max and they're offering their max? Like, what if their car breaks down and they don't have, whatever. So this pre-approval is the first step. That's what you need to do to find out what you can afford. All right. And then from there, we're going to try to give you the best possible property that meets your needs for what you can afford. And a lot of the times it gets into monthly payment. So we're gonna get to that in a second. Before we do, I want to smash these two myths. One is down payment and one is credit score. Okay. Everybody that, I don't know, whenever I hear someone talking about buying something and they haven't bought anything before, so first time home buyer, or maybe somebody who's not even really in that market, they think they have to put down 20%. And that's not true. You can put down as little as 3%. Anywhere from 3 to 5%, depending on the loan that you're getting and the lender you're using, you can put down 3 to 5%. I mean, that's way less than 20%. Much more feasible for people to be able to save that kind of money and afford buying something with 3.5% down or 4 or whatever they're putting down, than to save all the way up to 20%. That can be really difficult for a lot of people. And so I think some of you may be out there thinking you have to have 20%, and that's not true. So hopefully that, kind of breaks those shackles a little bit and frees you up to maybe start looking at buying something. And then the other thing is credit score. If you have a credit score in the high fives, you can probably get approved for a mortgage. There's other things they're looking at, okay? It's not just credit score and income, but, they're looking at debt to income ratios. They're looking at your overall debt, student loans, cars, credit cards, all that stuff. They're looking at bankruptcies. They're looking at how much debt you have overall, and then what do those payments look like per month? Because they really want to make sure that not only on the big picture of things your debt to income looks good, but they also want to make sure on a monthly payment situation that you're not killing yourself. You might only owe $5,000 on your car, But if it's $1,000 payment per month, that's really hitting you hard compared to most people who only owe $5,000 on their car, right? And that's obviously not a very realistic situation, but you get my point. They're looking at all these things to make sure they're not just looking at one aspect of the overall, and they're not just looking at the monthly. They're looking at all of it to make sure that you actually can afford what they're approving you for. So the credit score situation, some people think that they have to be in the sevens, and that's not true. You can get a loan when you have high 500 credit score. I think the minimum is probably 575 or 580. But I think I had one client, one of them was in the mid 600s in their credit score, and one of them was in the high 500s, and they bought a house, and they had a 5.5% rate. At the time, I think the going rate was anywhere from 4.75 to 5%. So they had a 5.5% rate, which is much higher than what a lot of other people were getting. But they knew that ahead of time. It wasn't something that anyone was hiding from them, and they were okay with it. It ended up being affordable for them per month, and they much rather buy something than continue to pay rent. So they did it. And again, I hope that some of you who are listening to this may be in that same situation where you're thinking, man, I really got to get my credit score up to a certain point. That's probably not true. And then, you got to save all the way up to 20% down in order to buy. And that's also not true. So if you're tired of paying rent and you're really eager to buy something and you've been paralyzed because of those two things, well, I am your saving grace, so to speak. And hopefully that removes those handcuffs, opens your eyes a little bit, and now you can start to search for a property that fits what you're looking for. So smashing those two myths was definitely the two main things I wanted to get to, and I hope that you take that away in a positive note and a positive light there. The other things that I just kind of want to open everybody's eyes to is I think some people may be throwing away some money on HOAs. Probably not property taxes as much, but definitely on HOAs. So, townhomes, condos, and communities that offer to plow or I guess shovel and mow the grass and take care of landscaping. Those types of communities have homeowners associations, which, I don't know. I think the lowest one I've seen is probably $125 a month. Typically, they're going to be 200 plus, and sometimes they can be even more than that. I mean, you want to be able to get something out of that. Okay, so there is a place for HOAs. I'm not completely against HOAs. If there's a pool, if there's a workout facility, maybe a clubhouse or a party room or something where you can enjoy something that you wouldn't otherwise have, because you're sharing it amongst the other people who live in that building and the community, then that makes it more worth it to me. Although I still would have to give it some good thought, considering what I may be giving up, right? So the opportunity cost of these things is what I'm after here, and I want you to understand how costly it is to have an HOA. So $50 a month is worth $10,000 in purchase price, okay? If you get a loan that's $10,000 more, that's going to be about $50 a month, okay? Give or take, right? Sometimes it might be like 47, or maybe it's like 51 or something like that, but it's right around $50 a month, all right? So if you're paying an HOA $200 a month, okay, because they cut the grass for you and shovel the snow, that's the same as 40 grand. You're not able to purchase as much because you're spending money on an HOA. So a $200,000 townhome could be $240,000 single family house, and the monthly payment would be the same. In that example, okay, you're eliminating the $200 HOA and replacing it with mortgage, basically. So if that makes a difference for you, then that is definitely something that you need to consider. And so what I'm trying to say is, on the flip side, where you may be looking at stuff online and maybe it's your first time buying, so you're looking at condos and you're looking at townhomes, and then you're doing the math and the mortgage calculator and the payment calculator, realizing that you don't think you can afford it. Well, take the other side of it. Try to do a single family home with no HOA, and maybe you can find something that's at the same price point or less without the HOA, and you just eliminated $200 a month or whatever the HOA was, maybe more, and that can probably be more affordable for you. So the only other thing to make things a little bit more affordable for you, and this is just kind of a side benefit, because I'm assuming that most of you don't want to pay rent anymore. You'd like to establish some equity in something that you actually own, that is worth something that you could sell later or whatever, and stop paying somebody else's mortgage with your rent payment. This is just kind of a bonus. So when you buy a property, even if it's an investment property or whether you live in it, either way, there's definitely a tax write-off there. So you can write off the mortgage interest and you can write off the property tax bill. The recent change, just to throw the facts out there, you can write up the property tax bill. You can write it off up to 10 grand. And that 10 grand also has to include your state income tax. So most people, if you have a tax bill over like 8,000, you probably aren't going to be able to write off. You're probably being limited by that. But hopefully we see more money in our pockets with the rates going down. But that is a political situation, and I do not want to talk about that. So that being said, just know that there are benefits to owning. That's an extra $10,000 you can write off plus the mortgage interest, and that is going to help you on your tax filings later, to deduct that from your income, which you wouldn't have if you were renting. So if it's an investment property, there's definitely some other tax benefits there as far as any kind of renovation that you have to do, any expenses that you have to put into that property. It's all write-offable. So, or deductible, I guess that's the right way to say it. Deductible. Sorry, not a tax guy, okay? Anyway, so that's really all I had for you, and I just wanted to sum it up. So get a pre-approval. That's the first step because that's really going to give you your limit, all right? That's going to either limit you on what you thought you could afford, or it's going to be just kind of nail in the coffin for what you thought you could afford, and you'll be buying well within what you thought you could afford. And you're actually going to need that to put in an offer anyway. No one's accepting offers these days without written pre-approval that says, hey, we can actually afford this. So you need to get that done anyway, and that's the easiest way to find out whether or not you can buy and what you can afford. But then two things to remember: the myths. You don't need 20% down. You don't need a perfect credit score. You should be able to get some sort of approval. Don't quote me on that, but definitely worth calling and finding out. If you have a credit score in the high 500s, and if you have at least 3% down, it's definitely worth a phone call to a mortgage lender. Hit me up. If you shoot me a message or email or whatever, call. I can give you several references to call about that. And last thing is, realize what you're paying in an HOA or any other monthly payment that you're making in regards to the property is limiting your opportunity cost is purchase price. Every $50 you're paying on something is $10,000 in purchase price. So keep that in mind as you're shopping. If you have a tax guy and you're looking for write-offs, that's the last thing, was you can write up to $10,000 off with the property taxes and your state income tax, which, again, that property tax bill, you're not able to write that off right now if you're renting. So it just helps all along the board. I'm a big proponent of buying at this point in the economy and the way that things are going, especially during the wintertime. Right now it's December. We're coming up on the holidays, and I would really strongly encourage you to contact me so that we can get the search going and this pre-approval process going and try to find you something while the market is definitely a buyer's market before things start to pick up February, March. So thanks for listening, guys. Please support the podcast if you want to. You can support the podcast by going to anchor.fm/brokerapproved, and there's a support this podcast button that will greatly help me out. This is not sponsored by anybody. I'm doing this on my own, so I really appreciate listening, sharing, liking, all that stuff. Stay tuned for the next one. See you later.